Hello, welcome to Basics of Immigration, INA History. Today we're going to talk just a little bit about the history of US immigration law where we are today. This isn't the most important thing to know about basics of immigration. However, it's a helpful topic to understand if you are trying to understand where there are deficiencies in our law today and why they are there. If you understand the history, it helps understand where we are today. To start with, let's go back a little bit. In ancient history, the beginnings of the United States, there weren't a lot of immigration laws, if any. And for 100 years or so, what was there was usually handled by states, counties, just different ways. Finally, Congress started to get involved and to make some laws. At the end of the 1800s, they started to regulate who came into the United States, how they came, etc. So the end of the 1800s, sorry, I'm pointing here like it's a timeline, because it will be a timeline in a minute. At the beginning of the 1800s, we started to have some laws regulating who came into the United States, who could become a US citizen, etc. Then in the early 1900s, immigration picked way up. And so Congress is making more and more laws about what you have to do in order to come to the United States, who would be prohibited from coming to the United States, etc. And throughout this period, there are a few different laws that Congress passed, changing this, figuring out that. Finally, in 1952, Congress passed a law that we call the INA, Immigration and Nationality Act. So I'm going to put that up here. Really, the INA is shorthand to say the United States immigration laws. When I talk about the INA, I'm just talking about the United States immigration laws that we have today. The bulk of those were written in 1952. Congress passed what is today still the basis of our immigration laws. Now, time went on, and they did change a few things. Some things changed in the 60s, some things changed in the 80s. In 1996, there were some big changes added, but these were all amendments to the INA of 1952. Finally, after 9/11, the terrorist attacks in 2001, Congress once again passed some laws in 2003 and 2005 that affect the INA and affect the immigration law. During the 1990s, and ever since then, the 2000s, Congress has attempted to change the immigration law. If you've heard of comprehensive immigration reform, the idea is to go back and change it comprehensively. However, they haven't been able to pass in both houses of Congress a total, complete change of the law. They haven't been able to pass a new law. So we are still functioning with the 1950 INA with some different pieces taken away and added on, band-aided and fixed over, which in some ways fixes some things, but also kind of makes a mess sometimes when if you've ever renovated a house or some kind of building, sometimes that makes it worse than just working with the original. So that's what we're dealing with right now, is a house that's been added on. A law that has been added on, taken apart, tried to fix, but ultimately is a 1952 version. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now let's talk a little bit about 1952 and today to understand why that's even an issue. Why isn't this just fine? Some things about the 1952 law are just fine. They're great. They probably wouldn't be changed even if we did get a new law, but other things have changed. And I want to just think about this, just do a thinking exercise with me for a minute. Let's think about 1952 and what the world was like, especially with regards to things that have to do with immigration and migration. And then today. So for starters, 1952, what do you know about 1952? Let's think about national security issues. With immigration, national security concerns are always going to be an issue. So in 1952, World War II had just ended. Our world had been at war all over. Millions of people, at least hundreds of thousands, I'm not really sure the number. Many, many people had died. Almost all the countries in the world had been involved in this big war. So even though it's a few years now, it's still heavily influencing what is being passed as law. So we're post-World War II. And of course, if you know anything about US history, you know that we are in the Cold War. So the United States is terrified of socialism, communism. This is our concern when it comes to national security. How did people travel in 1952? The bulk of people who were traveling internationally from one country to another were still traveling in ships. They were coming to the United States, they were most likely still coming in ships. We were starting to get airplanes, but they were not very common. Still mostly traveling in ships. Now let's look into the United States. Businesses. Let's look at businesses. Businesses in the United States are local. There are a few national businesses, but think about it. Stores where you go buy your food, where you go buy your clothing, these things are still local. Even agriculture and food, a lot of it's local, and what's not is probably national, coming on railroads. That's how businesses were running for the most part in 1952. These are just a few things. I'm not going to talk about everything, but these are a few that directly impact the law as it was written in 1952, and then contrast with today. Today, what are our national security concerns? We're not worried about people who were Nazi persecutors. That's not who's going to harm our country today. We're worried about terrorists in a variety of different forms. I'm going to just put terrorism is our national security concern, our number one national security concern. There are others as well. We're worried about drugs, other violence. These are concerns. How do people travel today? Obviously by airplane, number one way to travel by far. We still move a lot of goods with ships, but people don't travel in ships very much. People travel in airplanes, and they travel a lot more. Way more, coming in and out of the country. Businesses. Businesses are much more likely to be international businesses. We still have a few local businesses. We like to support them. We have tons of national businesses. Most businesses are at least national, and we have many, many international businesses. And there's no reason not to. Transporting goods and people is easy, it's inexpensive, it makes sense to share the resources of the whole world to grow and to develop. So that makes sense. We have international businesses. And just in general, we live in a globalized world. When we want to travel somewhere, we go there. When we want something from another country, we can get it. When we want to send something to another country, we can. People move, goods move. We live in a very different world today than we did in 1952. One other thing I'm going to mention that's different between then and now that should affect us, but maybe doesn't as much in immigration, is this world, the 1952 world, is paper-based. Things are sent in the mail, they're typed up or written by hand. Today, we operate with computers. We can communicate instantly with anyone in the world, pretty much. We have computers that can process things that people couldn't. We should be tapping into computers. Certainly the people who are migrating use computers. So today we have computers, 1952 were paper-based. All right, these are just a few of the differences. But as we've covered some of the other segments, I think it's helpful to understand these differences. And as we later talk about where things could be changed and where some of the problems are in our immigration system, it's helpful to understand this concept, different world. So we're operating with an immigration system that's based on this idea that people are going to migrate, this one-time thing, they're going to come over on ships and they're going to move here and live here forever, not going back and forth often like they could today. We have companies that were local, not a lot of international companies. Today, companies are international. They need to move their employees in and out. Our schools are international. Our communities are international. We share ideas, food, that's my favorite part, people, skills, all kinds of things, in and out. People are coming in and out of the United States all day, every day. So we really need a law that fits our world today. We really need to have an updated law. Now, the benefit of a long-term law is that it provides stability so people know what they're working with and operating under. That is important to understand as well. If we did change the law today, we would need to take into account things that have been in place for decades and how to address people who've been waiting in line for decades. If you watch the wait lists segment, you'll see there have been people who've been waiting and waiting and waiting. So if we change the law, we want to make sure and address that. And you never start completely from scratch. But here's the INA, 1952 INA, with some amendments, but operating in a world that's very different.